Welcome back to another video. Today we're out here on a scorching hot 100-degree day here in New York City, and we're going to talk about a video that I actually filmed all the way back in February when it was like 26 degrees. And that video is a prop test. I went out to our local office spot and took with me 10 total sets of props for Ethix normal tri-blade props, for Gemfan regular tri-blade props, one set of the Gemfan Floppy props, which are basically hinged props that kind of fold up like a Mavic prop, and then one quad blade prop, just to see what I thought, what I liked, and what I didn't like. And I just wanted to see if I tested them head to head, did I have a preference that was beyond my normal? My normals are the mangoes from Ethix, peanut butter and jelly from Flying Cinematic, or the Radberries. And occasionally I throw in some Vanny style Gemfans if I want to be a little more ostentatious with that sound. I'm going to apologize up front. I used the word spice a whole bunch. I don't know why it was stuck in my head. Maybe I was into some holiday spice drinks, but it's been so long I don't quite know why. But with that said, let's get into it and let's get up in the air.
Before I dive into this comparison, I want to give you some information on the props I used. I used 4 Ethix, 4 traditional Gemfan props, and 2 interesting props, which were the Gemfan Floppy prop, which is a prop that's a tri-blade held on by a pivot point to a central hub, making it, I guess, more convenient for travel. Not 100% sure I understand the real purpose of it, but it's at least an interesting prop, and I wanted to add it to this comparison. Also, a Hurricane 4-blade, quad blade prop. It's the only one in this comparison, so it's kind of a unique outlier. One thing I wanted to figure out before I went out for the test is I actually had 2 bags of each of these props, and I weighed every single prop in each of those 2 bags, and then I averaged it together because I was curious what the weight was in relation to the advertised weight, and also the relation between the weight for each prop. So I wanted to know which prop had the most variance in weight between the different propellers and which prop had the least variance. When it comes to total weight, the lightest prop in the test was the Ethix Radberry, coming in at 3.6025 grams, which is about 1/10 of a gram heavier than the advertised weight. The weight variances, the peanut butter and jelly and mango had no variance. Out to the 100th of a gram, all of the props weighed basically identical in both bags. So all 8 props, same weight. Most of the other props were about 0.01 or 0.02 grams apart, but the 4S Durable Freestyle from Gemfan sat a little over that, about 0.04 grams from the heaviest to the lightest, being 3.76 grams on the heavy side and 3.72 on the lighter side. Will this make a difference on a 5-inch freestyle drone? Probably not. It's just something that I was curious about. When it comes to the actual weight relating to the advertised weight, there was only 2 props that came under the advertised weight, and that was the candy cane and the Vanny style. The Vanny style was 4.28 average weight per prop. The advertised weight is 4.3, so 0.02 of a gram lighter. And then the candy cane props advertised at 3.8 grams, and they came in at 3.79 grams, so 0.01 grams lighter. Not a big deal. Pretty much everything else was about 0.1 gram heavier than advertised. The overall weight weenie of this test is definitely the Radberries at 3.6025 grams per prop. The lightest Gemfan prop I tested was those durable 4S Freestyles at 3.7425 grams per prop. And again, these are the averages. On the heavy side, if we're excluding the 2 weird props, was the Vanny style at 4.28 grams per prop. It was definitely the heaviest in this test. It was kind of interesting considering 2 of the props from Gemfan were 5.2 inches instead of 5.1 inches. So even the bigger props still weighed about 0.2 grams lighter than the Vanny styles. And just so you know, the heaviest 2 props I used in this test were the Hurricane X, the 4-blade props, and that came in at 5.3325 grams, which is pretty chunky. And then the floppy props, those came in at 4.845 grams per prop on average.
Beep, beep. I'm excited.
I'm really excited for when I get into the floppy prop. The floppy prop is the one I'm most curious about. Because I don't know if it's gonna like flip or spin or what it's gonna.
Who makes the floppy prop?
Gemfan, I think.
Starting off with my tried and true, the Radberries. As these are my normal go-to propeller, you can tell from the footage right out of the gate, these are ones that I feel most comfortable with. The flight feel is really good. It basically feels like you took the peanut butter and jelly props and then just turned up the punching, the cornering, and all of the other flight characteristics just a little bit. This can make the quad feel less cinematic and less smooth, depending on how you like your quad to fly. But if you like very punchy, aggressive freestyle, I think this quad is... I feel like this prop is spot on. I am going to pause on each of these. I slow down right in front of myself and do a quick punch, a roll, a flip, right near the camera. So I will cut away from my voice when that happens. So you get an idea of what it sounds like. And I will also include a little bit of GoPro audio right here for this prop. But it makes a whole lot of difference. I just really want to give that information to you, so if you like to use that prop noise when you're making your video, you know what each of these props sounds like coming through a GoPro. It is the GoPro Hero 11 Mini, if that makes any difference, but I assume the audio is going to be pretty similar regardless of the GoPro you're flying. When it comes to the sound of the Radberries, I really do feel like they make more of a roar than a howl or a scream. These really are my perfect sounding prop. They're not overly aggressive. I'm flying in a place where I need to be a little discreet. I think the Gemfan scream is a little too much sometimes. These really do fit a good balance between aggression and performance. So here we go. We're coming in. I'm going to do a little punch, a little roll, a little flip, and I'm going to shut up.
Oops.
And now that we finished up our flight with the Radberries, let's move on to prop number 2, which is the peanut butter and jelly.
This is probably the worst idea I've had in this weather.
No, actually it's a fucking interesting one because I think more people will fucking watch it.
Yeah, but I'm realizing I now have to change a shitload of props and my fingers are already frozen. Every time I land, I have to change props.
Except I would argue one of the most legendary props in FPV, the peanut butter and jelly. These props feel great. I think there's a reason they're probably one of the more popular props overall, especially within people who fly HQ or Ethix props primarily.
They feel slower.
Really?
Like, they feel a lot slower.
Well, the pitch is not really high. I think
it's 3 compared to 3.5, I think.
Yeah. I mean, it's still hell of a move.
Yeah, I mean, they definitely like... They definitely feel like good.
And now that we're finished that up, these really do have a great overall feel and great durability. I don't think you're going to find much better from especially HQ or Ethix. As for the sound, my best description of how these things sound are deep and smooth. Smooth like peanut butter. Unless you like chunky. I'm a fan of chunky in some applications, but I'm not going to get into that too much. Either way, these props do sound really good. They have a deep, kind of more aggressive rumble. I guess rumble's not the right word. They have a deeper sound than most of the other props in this test. And overall, I think they sound good. They fly great. Cannot knock the peanut butter and jellies as far as their overall performance. They work. There's a reason so many people fly them.
Okay, so now we're going up in pitch to 4.0. Ethix Candy Canes.
Next up, we have those deliciously sweet candy canes. these were pretty interesting. This is the first time I've flown a much pitchier prop. Most of the things that I fly are between like 3 and 3.5 pitch. This is the first 4 pitch prop. As you can kind of guess, shocking would be my first real adjective for these props. They feel fast. I think the lighter weight of these props also really helps them spin up and down real fast. They did feel a little manic. It didn't feel too twitchy, but it did feel very sharp. The same way like a light steering in a performance car might feel aggressive and very agile. These had that feeling. They felt just powerful. They felt sharp. They had tons of thrust. They definitely were the fastest prop that I flew in this entire test. Because of their much more aggressive pitch, they are similar to the other Ethix props in sound. They just bring up the sound volume. And here we're going to do our flips and rolls.
Punch.
And yeah, that momentum upwards is bananas. I don't know if it's really easy to take away from this video how much faster those things feel in just a straight full throttle punch, but impressive to say the least. The sound for these props, the higher pitch, is not necessarily pleasant. If you don't want to really annoy your neighbors, I probably wouldn't recommend this high pitch prop because it is an aggressive sound and it's not a pleasant sound. They're there for a purpose, to go freaking fast. And they do that, and they take no prisoners. You're going to give a little flyby. Whew. Man, these things just felt fantastic. I cannot say enough about how fast and just wild these things felt. It felt like I just turned the quad up. Even though I didn't touch the tune, I didn't do anything else, just putting these props on, it felt faster. I didn't touch the camera angle. Actually, that might be an adequate feel thing. It's like I took the camera and added like 5 to 10 degrees to it. It just instantly felt faster, instantly felt more locked in and sharp. And as you can see, I just felt comfortable with them pretty quick, getting in a little freestyle and kind of practicing the power loop challenge we had back in February. Now they're back on the ground. Let's get our next prop up and out.
That's the first time I've ever like felt a difference between props. Like I like the difference between the Vanny style and the...
You could tell just how much fucking pitch they are then compared to that.
Yeah, compared to the peanut butter and jellies,
Yeah.
These look ridiculous.
No, even those.
Yeah, well these are 3.3. The peanut butter and jellies are 3 flat. These look like there's no pitch.
Yeah.
These are... And now I'm actually even more curious about, I forget what I think the big ones are just called the P5s. I don't think they have a cutesy name. I think they're just straight black in color and P5s. But I think those, you're only supposed to use those with like low kV motors at high altitude. Because like, you'll burn your motors out. Yeah. So here we go with the Mangoes. I'm guessing these are going to feel a lot like the Radberries, and these are now going to feel slow in comparison to the candy canes.
And here we go with the Mangoes. Up and at it. These really kind of are the Goldilocks of props. And I'm going to do my little flips and rolls right here at the start, so I'm going to be quiet momentarily.
It's definitely slower.
Yeah.
Even though these props aren't significantly different than the peanut butter and jelly or Radberries, they did feel surprisingly slower, and I think that's because my brain was recalibrating after flying those candy cane props. Overall, these really do feel kind of like a Goldilocks. They have that same smooth, cinematic feel of the peanut butter and jellies, but they also have some of that spice from the Radberries. So if you want something kind of in the middle, or you just want a peanut butter and jelly prop turned up a little bit, I think the Mangoes are a fantastic option. They really do feel good, feel locked in, cannot say anything bad about them. While these probably don't completely supplant my Vanny style or Radberries when it comes to my favorite prop for freestyle, I do really like the feel. So if I'm going for something a little smoother, I might chuck a set of Radberries on if I'm going for more of a cinematic freestyle flight. And when it comes to sound, just like the pitch, these land right between the peanut butter and jelly and Radberry. Take a peanut butter and jelly and add a little sound spice to it, and you really just get kind of what I feel the mangoes sound like. They're not too intrusive, they're not too aggressive, so actually these may be a good option if you want a prop that flies a little spicier than a peanut butter and jelly, but still is discreet enough to fly around your house, your backyard, if you've got the space to fly a 5-inch. That way you don't pester your neighbors too much and you can kind of get away with a little more. And obviously, since these feel so comfortable and familiar to me, I added a little bit of extra freestyle in it, just kind of working through them. Part of this too was in this day, it was like 20-ish degrees. So it was very cold, and changing 8 sets of props throughout an hour and a half was pretty miserable. Doing the quick math in my head, that is 32 total props changed. My fingers were pissed. And so anytime I had a prop that I was just enjoying flying, I did burn that battery to the ground just to kind of give my fingers a little bit of a break when it comes to changing props. But let's get back on the ground, get the next set of props up, and now we're moving to the Gemfan.
Not that it makes a whole hill of difference, but the Gemfans seem to fit on the motor spindles a little better.
First up for the Gemfans are the 4S durable freestyle props. These ones were actually pretty surprising to me. They felt very, very, very sharp, almost a little too sharp. First things up, we're going to do our little flips and rolls. There we go. You can see the punch was very aggressive. Why these props are so kind of surprising to me is they have the same pitch as a lot of the other stuff that I was flying in this day. My only guess is these props have just a lighter profile, but the same pitch as the Vanny style. So that lightness just adds that little bit of extra, I don't know, aggression or spice to the way they feel. So they almost felt a little too sharp. These definitely were not my favorite prop of the day. Again, I think they probably felt a little like a lighter version of the Vanny style. The only real difference I saw with these props is when I was pulling out of dives, it did feel like there was a little prop wash I could induce into them, where almost all of the other props really never felt like there was any prop wash. And just for the record, I do fly pretty much stock beta flight, so the tune is about as forgiving as possible. These are fresh props, never crashed, all that fun. But it was just interesting feeling that little bit of prop wash that I'm really not used to with this drone. As for the sound, these things sound like the quintessential Gemfan. At higher RPM, they have that telltale scream. I'm weird because I like the scream, and I do like the way Gemfan props sound. Just a lot of the places I fly, I try to be a little bit more discreet. So when I get that Gemfan scream, I feel like it draws a lot of attention to me, and I'm not necessarily a fan of that. So overall, I tend not to fly props that make that traditional Gemfan scream. But again, sometimes it's fun to be just a little ostentatious, and these things had that in spades. And now we've come to my second go-to prop, which is the Gemfan Vanny style. They are very similar to the Radberries, 3.6 inch pitch, 5.1 inch length, just slightly more aggressive than the Radberries, but very similar feel. There's the punch, the roll, all the rest of that stuff. As for the Vanny styles, these are kind of my alternate prop. I always keep them in stock. Sometimes I just feel like flying them to have a little bit of variation in what I'm doing. And I love flying them. They feel really good. They feel really locked in. Again, they feel a lot like the Radberries. I don't know that I'd choose these necessarily for smooth or cinematic flight, because again, they tend to be a little pointier like the Radberries. I prefer a little smoother, lower pitch prop when it comes to filming, like the peanut butter and jellies. But overall, if I'm doing some freestyle, these things are absolutely finding their way onto my quad. As for the sound, they definitely have that Gemfan scream. As soon as you're above 60% throttle, it really kicks in, and it is kind of fun hearing it. There's a certain level of aggression. And as you can see, I am just so comfortable with these props. I'm so used to how they feel. They catch really well. They power loop really well. They just have a great feel to them in flight. I will also say, I think I'm going to include it, not 100% sure, it's kind of like right in here, but this is the only prop that I crashed. I was starting to push it a little bit, playing with inverted yaw spins and Emmelmans, and I just bit off a little bit more than I could chew and ended up on the ground. Didn't break anything or damage anything, but again, these props really inspire that confidence, and that confidence can sometimes be, let's go with intoxicating. I want to also include here, I think it's kind of obvious, but all of these props are brand new and fresh. The only thing I've done is take them out of the bag and weigh them up to this point. So there's no damage, no marks, no nicks, nothing that would compromise or change their performance. I wanted this to be as clean sheet test as possible. Obviously, I did have a spare set of props in case, like the Vanny styles, I got a little too excited while flying and had a little bump. That way I could complete the test with a fresh set. Always have a spare. And there it is. A little crash and burn. But with that said, let's move on to the next prop. And here we come to another first for me. This is going to be the first of the 5.2 inch props. This is a Hurricane Durable 5236.
Very different sound.
And there we go. I didn't want to hit my friend there, so you saw me do that little juke away. Got a little bonus extra hover there, so that way you get an idea of what it sounds like at hover and idle. The 5.2 inch prop, I didn't really notice a huge difference, at least in feel, to the 5.1 inch prop. I know it's only 0.1 of an inch, but I do feel like I feel a difference between 4.9 and 5.1 inch props. So I was kind of hopeful maybe it felt like it had a little bit more lift, but overall it felt very, very similar, extremely similar to the Vanny style prop. Honestly, I don't think it brought any real noticeable performance. I think if I was purchasing more props, this probably wouldn't make the cut. I think the Vanny styles feel so similar that they're going to be my go-to when it comes to Gemfans in the 3.6 inch pitch variety. When it comes to sound, just like the other Gemfan props in this test, they have that traditional Gemfan scream. I might say it was a little deeper. I think both of the 5.2 inch props may have lowered the screams like octave, I guess would be a way to describe it. So it isn't quite as shrill as some of the smaller props like those 4S durables or the Vanny styles, but it's definitely there. So if you like that feel, like that scream of a Gemfan, these things should be right at home on your quad. I will say, because of the extra length, this may not fit on tighter frames like the Skyliner. I'm sure you can make it fit, or it might fit with a little bit of, I say a little bit, it might fit with less clearance than ideal, but I would make sure before you buy a whole bunch of them that these fit on your frame. Because if you have a 5-inch freestyle frame, I can confirm for a Demibot, these fit perfect. For a Source 1, it was a little too tight for my comfort. I think it also depends on where you run your XT60 and stuff like that. And with that said, we're going to bring this back in for a quick landing, and we're going to move on to our last traditional prop, also a 5.2 inch prop. And here we go with our last quote unquote normal prop. These are the Gemfan 5226, so very similar to the previous prop, just a little bit lower pitch. So let's get up in the air and do our flips and rolls immediately.
Yeah, these definitely feel...
As expected, these really do feel like a, I guess, Gemfan version of a peanut butter and jelly prop. These feel like a slightly sluggish version of the 5236s that I flew immediately before this. It was almost like I took and I turned my rates down a little bit. It didn't feel like it had quite as much authority, but it did feel smooth. Almost no matter what I did, it felt smooth. So if you're trying to get smooth cinematic freestyle footage, this might be a good alternative if you don't want to fly a peanut butter and jelly. That lower pitch, that 2.6, is buttery smooth. Pretty much no matter what you do. Has good overall feel, good catch. Still freestyles like a boss, because again, it's a Gemfan prop that's meant for freestyle. Just, it's a little bit less aggressive, a little less sharp and punchy. Since these didn't feel all that much different than the previous, I really kind of cut my freestyle a little short and got back and got ready to throw up the two weird props. And here goes our first weird prop. This is the quad blade Gemfan Hurricane X prop. This is the heaviest prop in the entire game. So flips and rolls.
Yeah, you're right. It feels sluggish but fat, like quick.
Yeah.
While the increased weight of this prop did make it feel like the spin up and spin down time was a little sluggish, and the overall, like, I guess, feel or speed of this prop felt a little slower than what I'm used to with tri-blade props, it did make the cornering grip bananas. This thing just hooks up, locks in, and corners like it's on rails. I assume that's because there's just more surface area, so the disc loading on these props is slightly higher. I did also notice that when I did pitch and kind of toss maneuvers, the momentum that you can gain kind of quick and then maintain is actually, it feels like it's a little higher, but again, I'm not 100% sure. This really did feel like a similar prop, which is why I very quickly got accustomed to that quad blade and was doing my normal flips and flops. This had the most interesting sound. It was the quietest Gemfan prop. It was definitely the deepest, and that deep tone to the prop made it sound extra aggressive. So this is definitely the most aggressive sounding Gemfan prop I flew.
Floppy prop time. Honestly, I'm just gonna go.
That's weird.
I'm just gonna go dive the building, call it a day there. I don't wanna. Yeah, we'll see. We'll see what else I get up to. Okay, so let's get this in. Whoa. That's weird.
You're right.
Well, I know, but like, without giving it throttle,
I know. Yeah,
it wasn't like spinning evenly.
Last but not least, we've got the floppy prop. Let's do our flips and spins right out the gate.
Okay.
most important thing I can say for these is, despite them being hinged blades, so they all flop around when they're at rest, these feel very similar to the 5236s. I don't know that they feel exactly like a 5.1 inch 3.6 pitch prop, but overall these things felt completely normal, which I think is the most interesting part about these props. If you handed me this drone without being able to see the props, I would assume these are just normal tri-blade props. And I think that's pretty cool that something so innovative and unique as floppy props can feel so pedestrian. It gives a lot of function to something that doesn't really change much else in its character. As for the sound, it sounds like every other Gemfan tri-blade prop, which I think is a huge thumbs up. And also interesting, I'm surprised the weight didn't make all that much difference. I think that might be why it felt like the 5.2 inch 3.6 pitch prop, because the weight was a little heavier. Before I close out this video, I wanted to give some kind of overall scores for this test. I mentioned them throughout this video, but here's kind of a overview of all of those. So when it comes to sound, my personal winners are the Hurricane X. They sound so different. It's almost like a quiet scream. I think it's really interesting and probably my favorite sounding prop I've ever flown. The close second place is a tie between the Vanny Style and the Radberries. You'll see that those two tie quite often because they're very similar in construction, both about 3.5 to 3.6 in pitch and 5.1 inch blade length. And the Mangoes came in third for the sound category. They just have a really good tone and pitch to it, and so they took that third slot. When it comes to flight feel, my personal favorite goes to the Radberry and the Vanny Style. Those are the two props I fly most often, so that's why I take this one a little bit as a grain of salt, but those really just feel at home for me when it comes to freestyle. I will say that those two tend to be a little bit more twitchy than the peanut butter and jelly props, which ranked a little lower for me, but overall I think I love the feel of those. When it comes to flight feel, the second best prop for me is the Mangoes. They're very similar in feel to the Radberries. They're a little more toned down, they give a little bit smoother flight feel, but overall they feel very familiar to me, which is why they really, for me, take second position. And then last is the Hurricane 5236 durables. There is just something about them. They are fighty, they are punchy, they are aggressive, and I really like the way they feel. They are, again, a 3.6 inch pitch, which is very similar, and a 5.2 inch blade length. So very similar to what I feel most at home, which is probably why I rank them so high in flight feel. Now we go to punch, and unsurprisingly, the lightest, highest pitch prop has the best feeling punch. Those candy cane props felt like a bullet in compared to everything else, and anything that I flew before or after felt a little slow. It stood out so much. It gained altitude like a rocket. And if you want something to feel fast, I highly recommend those candy canes or their, I want to say it's the watermelons. I'm not 100% sure, but Ethix makes a 4.9 inch prop if your frame can accommodate the 5.1 inch prop of the candy cane. Next on punch is the Vanny Styles. I think those just have so much aggression to them. I don't know why that 0.1 pitch is so much different than the Radberries, but it does make a difference, and that punch does just feel better on a Vanny Style. And then coming in a four-way tie for punch feel are the Radberries, the Mangoes, the 5226 Freestyles, and the 4S durable Freestyles from Gemfan. All four of those are very similar with the exception of the one 2.6 inch pitch prop, but all of them had a great overall punch feel. Felt very aggressive, but again, a little more controlled and a little less manic than something like the candy canes. So for good punch, any of those four are my bronze tier list. Unsurprisingly, for anybody who's flown a quad blade prop before, the Hurricane X and the Candy Cane Tide for cornering feel both felt incredibly hooked up, incredibly sharp, and had a really, really good locked-in feel when going through turns. Obviously, for the Hurricane X, that extra blade just gives a lot more surface area, a lot more thrust, just a lot more authority when it came to turning. And the Candy Canes, I think because of their, once again, their lightweight and their extreme pitch, it just gave a certain sharpness. And I'm not 100% sure if it's the tuning of the quad or what have you, but it did feel very locked in. So as far as cornering feel goes, those Candy Canes are real good. In second place, I have a two-way tie between the Vanny styles and the Mangos. They both feel really locked in, really sharp in the corners. They did exactly what I wanted to do, whether I was doing an inverted yaw spin or just a slow, gentle banked corner. They had the right feel. And last but not least is the Radberries, which I kind of found interesting that I liked the feel of the Mangos in the corners better, but hey, it's the way it felt, and that pretty much sums up how I scored these props. Down below, I'm going to include a link to the Google Doc for my spreadsheet for the test that I did.
And there we go. That was the prop test. Overall, I think it was actually a pretty fun exercise that I think everybody should do. Maybe next time you're ordering from your local hobby shop or from Get FPV, Race Day Quads, Pyro Drone, Fly High FPV, shout out to him. He is a community member and a fantastic place to shop if you haven't tried him already. But next time you're placing an order, just go in there and throw in a few extra sets of props that you maybe haven't tried yet. I would highly recommend checking out some of the larger Gemfans if your frame will accommodate it. Check out maybe some Ethix props if you've never tried an Ethix prop. Maybe throw even in a Dal prop. If you've never tried the toroidals before, they're an interesting one to at least try flying once. They probably won't become your favorite prop, but what I would say is look at different pitches, look at different lengths, look at different shapes, and see what fits your flying style best. One of the most important things I learned from this exercise was just to give stuff a try, especially when it's something like props, where you can get a whole bunch for not a ton of money. You gain a whole bunch of experience, and maybe even you find a new prop that is your favorite to fly. With that said, thank you for joining me in this video. I'll catch you in the next one. Peace. Bye.